How's everybody doing today? Good morning again. How's everyone doing today? Yes, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's so much better. Well, hey, welcome back. We've got another really terrific panel. I know you're going to enjoy hearing what our panelists have to say today. We've got a really great mix of folks that, you know, from the OSD level, acquisition, and at the ALC at Tinker. So I've got some questions that I have in my head that I've lined up to ask them. But again, I really want to try to get some questions in from the audience today. And yesterday when we were doing the panel, there was some sort of clock malfunction and we didn't have enough time to get to your questions, and I apologize for that. But today, have your questions fed in and we'll do our very best to get to them. Okay, so let me introduce our panelists today. Mr. Stephen Morani is a member of the Senior Executive Service and currently the Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. In this capacity, he is the Principal Staff Assistant and Advisor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, the Deputy Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Defense on Sustainment in the Department of Defense. Prior to this role, Mr. Morani served as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Logistics. In this capacity, he served as the Principal Advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment in the oversight of logistics policies, procedures, resourcing, and effectiveness to provide the required material readiness to support the warfighter. His logistics portfolio included maintenance, supply, distribution, international logistics, weapons system product support, and logistics workforce development. Mr. Morani, it's a real pleasure to have you here today. We've known each other a long time. It's great to see you at the helm. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Kevin.
Appreciate it. Next, we've got Miss Leigh Method, who is also a member of the Senior Executive Service and currently serving as the Department of Defense's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Logistics and is the Principal Advisor to the Assistant Secretary for Sustainment. She's also a certified professional logistician. Kind of knows what she's doing, like everybody sitting up on this panel. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Her responsibilities include the department's logistics strategy and policy on supply, storage and distribution, property and equipment, transportation, and program support. As part of her duties, she oversees $100 billion in inventory and inventory management practices at $2 billion in airlift and transportation programs. Ms. Method also oversees operational contract support, non-tactical vehicles, equipment, and material policies. Ms. Method, we go back a ways. Good to see you where you're at. Thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate it. All right, Ms. Angie Tymofichuk is also a member of the Senior Executive Service and currently serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Logistics and Product Support, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition. She is responsible for enterprise oversight of product support, supply chain management, material maintenance, and support functions required through the life cycle of weapon systems. In addition, she is the functional advocate for product support managers and influences logistics and product support resource decisions with a focus on ensuring weapon system sustainment levels that meet warfighter requirements. Ms. Tymofichuk, it took me multiple times to be able to pronounce your last name right. I think I got it. Did I get it?
You did.
Okay. Thanks for being here, ma'am. Really appreciate it. And last, the guy who decided to wear green today for St. Patrick's Day. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
You, buddy.
Major General Jeffrey King is the commander of the Oklahoma Air Logistics Complex. He leads a team of more than 10,000 military and civilian professionals, delivering the combat power for America. Personnel at the complex performs program depot maintenance and modifications on numerous heavy aircraft, maintenance, repair, and overhaul of numerous aircraft engines, and a wide variety of commodities for the services and foreign military sales partners. He is also responsible for the development and sustainment of a diverse portfolio of mission-critical software for the Air Force and worldwide aircraft battle damage repair capability for multiple weapon systems. General King, I don't know what happened to me, but it's great to see you wearing those two buttons. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, brother.
Really good to have you here. Okay, like I said, got some questions lined up. I think I'm going to start off with Mr. Morani, see what he has to say to us today. So, I understand there was a memo that was signed out by the Deputy Secretary recently, and it dealt with establishing 2 new Assistant Secretary of Defense components, the ASD for Industrial Base Policy and the ASD for Energy, Installations and Environmental. So from your perspective, Mr. Morani, how does that impact your organization and all of us?
So thanks, Kevin, for that question. Actually, that question gets asked quite a bit, and I don't know if you're watching any of the nominations and hearings to appoint our political leadership, but we have a nom for the ASD for Sustainment. His name is Mr. Chris Lohman. He had his hearing, and he had to refer to that memo probably on 10 occasions to answer questions with the congressional leadership on what his role was. So you're not the only one asking that question. So I'm not a big fan, if you know me, of reorganizing because sometimes, you can do different things. You can, fix one thing and break 2 others through a reorganization. You really ought to organize based on what the threat is, how you're resourced. So I'm not a big fan, but for this reorg, I was a huge fan because we were very much buried inside an organization that was too large. If you remember AT&L, Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, Secretary Kendall referenced it. He led that organization. When he departed, they broke up the organization and they established 2 undersecretaries, Research and Engineering and Acquisition and Sustainment. Sounds good, right? Focus on those 2 specific areas. Well, when they did that, they took 2 very large assistant secretary organizations and mashed them together. And what happened was the installations, environmental, and energy portfolio really dominated that period for about 4 years. So Honorable McMahon was here. He may still be here. The kinds of issues that he had to deal with were not sustainment related in our vernacular and what we care about. So for about 4 years, not a lot of focus got put on logistics and material readiness. So this reorganization established reestablished what under the AT&L structure was 2 ASDs. One's that focused on logistics and material readiness, and that includes Ms. Method's Office for Logistics. DLA falls under us. We have a material readiness DASD, and then product support. And we also added a new member to the family, which is the Defense Microelectronics activity. So we reestablished this focus on sustainment and logistics, and then we gave the leadership of installations, energy, environmental back to an ASD. The other thing that Kevin mentioned is industrial policy. So we are really closely linked with our partners in industrial policy because the defense industrial base includes both the commercial sector and the organic sector. So we have to partner, and we have to do a better job of that. So now we've established that to an assistant secretary level. They've never had that throw weight before, right? And why is that? Because it's a strategic imperative. Shaping a 21st defense industrial base is what we call a big play under alignment to the secretary's priorities. Other big plays that we're focused on are driving competitive advantage. You heard about competition in the speaker's comment talking about the Indo-PACOM theater. You saw how we're all converging on that top left quadrant. Well, that convergence is going to be extreme competition for resources. So that is allowing us to refocus in the areas of sustainment, material readiness, and the broader defense industrial base. Another area that's a big play that we focus on is modernization of our strategic systems and sustain our nuclear deterrence. I talked about shaping the industrial base. Our partners in Australia are probably happy that we're focusing on enhancing our global partnerships. And if I say AUKUS, I'm sure everyone on that table knows exactly what I'm talking about. This agreement, this cooperative agreement to ensure that we as partners can leverage each other's capacity to affect that particular theater. So a lot going on to refocus on sustainment. So we have a seat at the table now. We're not going to give it up. We're kind of selfish about that. I want to just address one more thing before I go on. I know I'm taking some time here, but we knew this was coming, that this reorg was coming. So in our area, because I was the principal deputy focusing on logistics. We all took a knee together, all the DASDs, myself, DLA, and we wrote a strategy. And you can go to the webpage, you can Google, ASD Sustainment, the webpage will come up, there's a link, and our strategic plan is there, and it covers 2 to 6 years, really, or the next 6 years, bridges the FIDEP. And it's 4 goals, with objectives, lines of effort, and then one thing you'll see on there is the governance, right? We talked about governance and bureaucracy, and this is really important because we don't do it to the services, we do it with the services, right? We're OSD, but it's a partnership. And Ms. T's laughing, but we talk all the time because she is a member of that governance structure. We have governance for logistics, material readiness, industrial base. These are the forms that we do work through. So all the goals, objectives align to those bodies that we can solve problems at our level, and if we need to bring them up to the deputies level, we have a way of doing that. So for the sake of time, I won't go through. I'll just hit on the top, what the goals are, and you can look it up, and I guarantee you, every single one of you will see yourself in the strategy. They're strategic goals, and they focus on strategic outcomes. Delivering sustainable logistics support to support our DoD mission, and that's not just our military mission, but in support of the interagency and our global partnerships. Deliver cost-effective material readiness to meet warfighter requirements. Very much a organic industrial base focus on delivering operational readiness and ensuring that we have an industrial base that can support that, particularly our organic industrial base and the investments necessary that Congress is telling we need to make. So I think General King will like that. Third one is enabling effective, affordable, sustainable warfighting capability. This one's very much focusing on driving sustainment into design, right? If we think we're going to affect sustainment when it's fielded, we're too late. So we have to design the weapon systems to be reliable, maintainable, sustainable, cost-effective. And that happens up front, ensuring that our sustainment requirements are not just considered, but that are part of design. And we have key performance parameters that we use to measure that. So we are going to be relentless, at least while I'm here, about focusing on that, because that's what's going to deliver across the life cycle. So we have to take a life cycle view. We should be measuring program offices on life cycle decisions, not cost, schedule, performance decisions, because if we don't get it right up front, we're going to pay more in the out years throughout the life cycle. And the last one is transforming global logistics to deliver readiness and lethality. Very much a warfighter focus strategy that DLA is at the center of to ensure that we have supply chains that can deliver operational readiness to the warfighter. With that, I'll stop, turn it back over to you, and I think you'll probably hear Ms. Method riff on that a little bit with some of the things she's doing in her area.
Okay, wow. I will give $20 to anybody that can repeat what Mr. Morani just said. That is big change and much needed change. Will pay off big time. I don't know if you saw Mr. Morani, but General King was sitting here going like this. Yeah. Yep. So thank you so much for helping to implement all those changes. It's a little hard to imagine, but like you said, you get on the website and it'll become a lot more clear, laid out. The $20 thing is real. I'll do it, but it has to be to Mr. Morani's satisfaction. Okay, Ms. Method. So there's a lot of focus on going green, right, across our nation and the world. And I know that there was an executive order that was signed out not too long ago by President Biden saying that it wanted to make sure that climate considerations were taken into account for every single part of what we do, foreign policy, national security, everything across the department. So I wanted to ask you, I think that's in your portfolio, I wanted to see what your thoughts are on how we're doing, what we're doing, and how it will affect sustainment overall.
Yep, so that's an easy question to answer, right, in like 2 minutes?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
first of all, thanks. I really appreciate being able to be here and be back with Log Nation again. As Mr. Morani mentioned, climate change is one of our big plays within the department. I don't own climate change. We all do. We all own that sustainability piece. And from a sustainment perspective, although we may not label it as such, we have green language in our policies. but we definitely need to do more. I'm going to kind of address it in a couple different ways, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief, and then maybe in questions there'll be more. We're addressing climate change in two ways. One is about adaptation, the ability to fight through the effects of climate change in our operations, and then mitigation to reduce our impacts, things like greenhouse gas emissions. Mr. Morani mentioned, or you mentioned the executive order on tackling climate crisis at home and abroad. The department recently published the DoD Climate Adaptation Plan. If you Google DoD Climate Adaptation Plan, it'll pop right up. It's 20 pages or so, easy to read, and it talks about 5 lines of effort. Line of effort 4 is the one I'm going to address, and that one specifically, supply chain resilience and innovation. So this should strike a lot of great ideas out there that are coming we can attach to this climate agenda. It was published last September by Secretary Austin, and if you go to sustainability.gov, you can get a lot more information of what the whole of government is doing on this. Line of effort 4 on supply chain resilience and innovation has 3 focus areas. One is about assessing our resilience for supply chain. That's all those climate change considerations, the ability to fight through. We need hardening our existing capacity and shifting to onshore capabilities, or especially the last mile that we've talked about here this week. And if we can't do that, at least stockpiling the key materials and critical efforts that we have so that we can make sure we can continue to support the fight. And the third one is leveraging purchasing power, and I'm going to hang on this one for just a second. That is about using the power of our purse with our industry and with our vendors to specifically look at key climate resilience and mitigation strategies. Things like requiring reporting of greenhouse gas emissions as part of the contract, considering climate change vulnerabilities as a material weakness in financial reporting. These are just considerations. That doesn't mean it will happen. It should happen. This is something we work with the acquisition community. But to address that and think about things like more microgrids and other types of power strategies that we can use, solar recharging and things like that, that can make ourselves more agile, more flexible, but also meeting that climate challenge. The second thing I want to address briefly, because I would be, that first executive order is really, it's the whole of department, and I don't particularly own that, and in terms of reporting that to our senior leaders, but I do specifically have reporting requirements within a different executive order, and that's on catalyzing clean energy. It's on sustainability, and in particular, non-tactical vehicle fleet electrification. And there's a lot of lovers and haters, depending on what side you're on, and like everybody wants to do it, but lots of unfunded mandates out there. I will tell you that we have been very clear in the conversations through our department leadership and into the president's councils on this, that this is a tripod operation. The electric vehicles procurement is the easy part. Manufacturers make them, they put them on the GSA schedule, you go out to the schedule, you buy them, you get them, they arrive, and then you put them to use. The other 2 parts are not so easy. One is the grid. Think about Texas in January. You got to have a good stable grid to be able to put these on. They also have to have the charging stations, and there's all kinds of opportunities out there. And I'll point to one thing I mentioned to a couple folks here today, or this week. You know how you can take your iPhone and you can put it on a charging station. You don't have to plug it in. You can just sit over the top of it, and then you pull the phone off. It's charged up. You can do the same thing with electric vehicles now. So think about rollover pads, end of runway vehicles have to sit there to be able to respond to runway incursions and stuff. They can sit on those pads, they're automatically being charged, and then when they're ready to go, they're fully charged. They just drive away, they don't have to unplug. You don't have anything to hit either, right? So think about your bus fleets parked in yards. Think about your ops officer in pro super vehicles. You can sit those over the top of a pad, they're charging while you're in the shop changing out paperwork or something. So there's lots of things we can do in that area. And I also want to just say from the bottom line, from our business, we can and will do better. And we are trying to set the conditions so that the services and the components can operationalize this strategy, and then you at the wing level can execute. So thanks.
Yeah, obviously really important takes a lot of effort to make it happen, but it's good to see the department moving forward. So thank you for that explanation. Ms. Tymofichuk, the depots, you know, we've got one 20 miles up the road here, but all the depots they've been around a while. I think they were built in the 70s, but they're in great shape. But what are we going to do to make sure we can continue to have the infrastructure and really even the people we need to be able to have the capabilities and the technical competence that's necessary to provide you know, everything we need in the future to meet any potential requirements that we have? I mean, that's, you know firsthand, sir, that's a massive undertaking. But it falls in Ms. T's portfolio of things to work on. So I just wanted to get some insight from you on your vision for the depots and how we can make sure we have what we need in the future.
Thanks, Kevin. I don't know if he's still here, Chris Hill. I got to listen to his keynote yesterday, and he talked about, you know, you're towards the end of a multi-day conference, and you get to say ditto what Lieutenant General Miller said. But I realize most of you probably weren't here for the NDIA keynote session that he gave on Tuesday, so I'll just spend a few minutes talking about the depot modernization plan that General Miller articulated on Tuesday afternoon. And yes, General King lives this daily, and Jeff's sick, you get to ask no questions at the end. So it is, and one clarification I will make, Kevin, this is General Miller's plan as the AFSC commander. Okay. My job and my responsibility is to take his plan that is a culmination of the work that the complexes and the LG directorate have put together, and then represent and advocate for it within the building, within the Pentagon and the resourcing processes, answer congressional questions and that kind of thing in coordination with the Sustainment Center. But General Miller talked about 3 phases to that modernization plan. There's the keep up, the catch up, and the leap forward. And the keep up phase is, if you're not aware, we are required to invest 6% of our, there's a calculation on our revenue that we make within the depots. We're required to reinvest in modernization and upkeep on our depot facilities, and we do that. We have a combination of various funding factors that we bring in, and we exceed that 6% annually. The second phase is the catch up, and so if you've ever been in a depot facility and walked the halls, they are enormous, and the infrastructure in those facilities is just phenomenal. It's amazing. If you think about the offices that you live in on a daily basis or the hangars that you're in, sorry to say, all of our facilities have some maintenance or some sustainment need associated with them. So I see heads shaking out there. You understand what that means. Now think about that on steroids when it comes to a depot perspective and just the industrial equipment alone and what we need to reinvest and to keep up and to modernize those facilities. So we have a bow wave of activities, and that's what's called the catch-up. We're catching up on the things that we probably should have done but couldn't afford to, or one reason or another. And then the third phase is the leap ahead. It's, okay, if we could redo some things to make the most effective, efficient depot, kind of think of the future activities, that's what we would go after and do. We were just talking the other day about agile common hangars. Can we build hangars one size that fit multiple airframes, that kind of concept. That's a little bit more difficult to go fund, producing a business case to go make those investments for the service. So I think at least weekly, Jeff, we're discussing with either you or your staff on different ways to get after that. So in the last 4 years, we've spent about $2 billion investing in our depots towards this plan, right? You think that's a lot of money? Until, again, walk the floors of those depots and realize that we're not just talking about the building, we're talking about the equipment that's in it, we're talking about the hidden infrastructure, we're talking about everything we heard this week and about digital, how we bring that into our maintenance facilities too. So there's a lot of things that we need to invest in, and $2 billion is not nearly enough. And then finally, I'll tell you that if you haven't been in one of those depots, again, walk the halls. Get yourself invited on a tour. Go see what we're talking about. There's flight line maintenance. Yes, thank you. Then there's the depot, the artisans that help and sustain those fleets and provide the readiness that we need. And please, I would encourage you to go see them. Understand when it comes to your time in the Pentagon and you're sitting on, I know there's some of the panel chairs sitting out there, when you're sitting on those panels and have those resourcing decisions, you understand what it means so that we can have those conversations together. And I'm a rules person, so I'm about my 3 minutes.
Okay. Wow, that's good. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Okay, so General King, you have a massive amount of responsibility at Oak City. I mean, all the folks up here have a tremendous workload. But, you know, you're in charge of OCALC, and that's no small feat. I worked in a depot before, up the way at Hill. It was one of the best assignments I ever had. I highly, highly encourage all of you that are wearing the uniform to consider, you know, trying to get an assignment in one of the ALCs. But what I want to ask you about is, I mean, how do you feel about the organic industrial base and its viability for the future? And one of the things I hear a lot in conversation is, okay, we do great day to day, daily demand, you know, we're knocking it out of the park. Yeah, we've got a few warts, but we're working on them, right? But what about our surge capability? That's one of the concerns, right? Is if the balloon goes up, can we surge? Not just, quite honestly, not just, you know, organic, but what about the commercial? And I don't necessarily need, or you can expand on that if you want, but from your perspective, ALCs, how are we doing, and do we have those surge requirements prepped and ready to go?
Yeah, that's awesome, and Kevin, thanks for having me up here. What's really neat is I've come to these conferences for years, up through group command, having never worked in a depot, and the depot commanders have these beautiful, eloquent speeches about depot production and this and that, and I was just like, dude, I don't care, where are my airplanes and my parts, right? And so now I'm here looking out across the crowd, and we're talking about these macro topics, and all I see is, dude, where are my parts and airplanes, right? So, totally get it. And so the things we're talking about is meant to help give you a little bit of insight into some of the bigger things that it takes to be able to go faster and get you what you need, right? Give you some insight that your current jobs or positions haven't allowed. But I will double down and say, if I could change one thing about my career, it would have been to serve as in a depot when I was younger. I think I would have been 10 times the group commander. That's setting a low bar, but I could have been 10 times the group commander and much better MAGCOM A4 if I understood Big L logistics the way that I did or just a few months into a depot tour. So I commission that to you. So the depots, all three of them are very, very big organizations. It takes a lot of help. My counterparts will tell you that. I look at depot operation in terms of people, plant, production, and partnerships. Those are kind of the four lenses, with plant being physical plant. Three of those we're doing pretty well in. The one that concerns me most with respect to your question on the viability of the organic industrial base has to do with the physical plant. And for those of you who are not too familiar with the terms, defense industrial base to components commercial side, you find out in the vendor hall, right? Those are our commercial counterparts. The organic industrial base are primarily the depots and supply chain and the regional surf nodes, and then in some cases down to work you're doing in the field. And one point of correction, the depots were built in the 40s in the buildup of World War II, not the 70s.
I knew that. I wanted to see if you caught it.
Good
on you. Right here.
Glad I could help.
Thanks.
Yeah, so, and I just tie that into my physical plant conversation, right? You wouldn't drive a car or fly an airplane, even our newest airplanes, our oldest airplanes are newer than the 40s. And the challenges with the physical plant piece are, in the depot, just like in the field, we struggle with getting enough modernization and recapitalization funding to keep them up, right? And that's just for the work we're doing. Much less modernize them for the benefit of the force, because there's no owner for that. So like at Tinker, we're the home of engine production. The last test cell we built was 1974, right? The brick and mortar test cells are not large enough or robust enough to be able to handle the size of the engines with the thrust we're producing. But because those test cells support everybody, there's no owner. I can't go to ACC, AMC, anyone else. That is an organic problem that doesn't compete as well with new mission. So it just kind of sits and parks and moves up, and then, oh no, there's a higher priority. Oh no, there's another, right? So modernizing for our needs is important. And another thing we need to do, has anyone been to Delta Tech Ops? Have you toured that plant? Incredible. You go to Delta Tech Ops, they have a long hangar with a bunch of slots. They can back any one of their airplanes into it, push stands up to it, and then pull it straight out. At Tinker, we have to take the tail off a KC-135 just to get into that World War II hangar to do a PDM on it, right? Adds a week's worth of work. B-52s, we crab the gear, wedge them in a hangar, stacked on each other, and if the one up front is unsupportable for engines, everything is behind it is blocked. Or if there's a structural problem, everything behind it is blocked. We can't just pull in and pull out, right? So we need to be thinking about our depots like MROs and not building them out. Hey, KC-46 is coming in. We need to build a hangar that fits a KC-46. Awesome. Well, what if KC-Y is different than KC-46? Or what if we are not building B-17s and B-24s anymore? We need to work on B-52s, right? How do we make that work? And that's a challenge at all three depots. So how do we get higher priority within the MILCON to be able to do it better, faster, cheaper for you all? That's one. The other is new mission MILCON. The challenge there, if the program puts the facilities into the program funding, then they will be funded, they will be built on schedule. The problem is cost, schedule, performance. As program managers strive to keep the viability of their program, they go, wow, we're running over budget. In order to field the number of airplanes we want, something's got to go. Okay, we'll cut the hangars out. So now they're no longer the funded part of the program, they're lobbed in with the rest of the MILCON to compete against everybody else's priorities. So getting the hangars built to support your mission is another big concern. With respect to surge operations, we do really, really well. We generally have the equipment and the people or can make that work. Our biggest concern is really material. Mm-hmm. And you don't really surge a PDM, right? It takes 130 days to PDM a 135. You know, it takes, if you've seen My Cousin Vinny, it takes 20 minutes to make grits, right? I mean, it's physics. It's just the right way. So that process is pretty well set. Now, engines, to some degree, you can surge. Commodities is what we're really talking about, getting you the parts to be able to regenerate. And our limitation there is funding, which usually is not an issue in time of war, but material availability. And that is one of our biggest constraints and highest costs in the depot is material.
That's great, and I love the My Cousin Vinny reference. That's good.
I couldn't do this without a movie quote, at least one.
Okay. Mr. Morani, back to you. Sir, I don't think the term logistics or supply chain has been in the media as much it's never been in the media as much as it's been the last 18 to 24 months. You know, where are our goods? Literally, where are they? Mm-hmm. Do we have enough goods? So supply chain, mainstream media, everywhere you hear about it. So what are we, the Department of Defense, doing to improve our visibility over the supply chain?
So great question. So I'll try to leverage what's already been talked about. I think yesterday you all had a session in the afternoon or a couple sessions on decision advantage and what you're doing in that space with, you know, I'll say it, data. Got that out of the way. It used to be additive manufacturing was the word everybody said. Now it's data. But so we are on this journey though, and the good news is we're all on the journey. And it's not just bottom up in our log community trying to modernize our IT systems and explain why it's necessary to have this end-to-end view from design all the way to disposal and the integration of what I call life cycle logistics information. You know, we've been on that journey for a while, and many of you in the room have been on it and are still working it. But we now have top-down support of this. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense cares about this, and she has produced a couple memos providing direction that the services have built out plans on. You know, we call it creating data advantage. You've messaged that a little bit different, but it's all about using the data that we have to build that better supply chain visibility, decision support capability. And supply chain visibility has been something that has been haunting us forever, right? And it's, for a warfighter, it's critical. And really the distribution piece of that, we're struggling with that, particularly in large AORs like Indo-PACOM. But the good news is we recognize it. We have tools available now that we never had before to be able to action this data. We're trying to put the data in environments that make it accessible to multiple users so that they can build out the data advantage or decision advantage that particular leader needs at that level, right? I'll give you an example of one area that we've built out some really tremendous visibility that we're using today that I mean, as little as 18 months ago, it would have taken an army of people to pull it together, and that's munitions. You probably think munitions are pretty important right now, right? I think the Ukrainians think they're important. And when you go into conflicts, it's food, water, fuel, and munitions. And so the questions have already started coming. How many of this munition do we have? Where are they? What is our consumption? So there's some key precision munitions we're asking those questions on. But fortunately, we built out an application in the Ivana platform. We call it MRI, Munitions Readiness Initiative. And this is leveraging all this data out there. And I have to thank industry, because industry is a partner with us on there so that we can see the front end of this problem, right? So we have information on who makes it, how long does it take, what's it cost, where the facilities are, what the capacity is on the industry side, all the way to the consumption side, right? So we can answer those thorny questions now of, where are they, how many do we have against this, particular plan, how many are we consuming, and once we get to a certain floor, and what does that mean to us? How long is it going to take if we expend the number we want to expend to re-establish those production lines, because you all know lead time. Everything we're lead time away on, right? So we now have that visibility, and we're answering questions in a matter of hours that used to take us months. That is real decision support. That is real decision advantage, because now we can tell our senior leaders, hey, we may not want to use that. Right? We may want to take a different approach, use a different munition, or use a different tool to try to bend our enemy, to our will. So that's one area. But to answer your overall question, we're doing a lot, and we have the alignment now like we never had it before, from the department level down through the service level. The thing that's missing is that elusive dollar, right? How do we prioritize to move faster? We know what to do. We have the relationships, the capabilities in place. But again, it's now our job is to, advocate, compete for that funding so that we can go faster. But it's an exciting time, if data can be exciting to you, in the department, so that we can start seeing ourselves. That's really the key. And once we can see ourselves, we can act better. So thanks for that question.
Okay, well, I see Dara there, so I know you've got a lot of questions. I would ask the panelists, I know I had other questions for you, but maybe let's try to do kind of like a lightning round. I don't know what the questions are that's coming from the audience, but I want to get to them. So if I could ask for Dara to kind of toss out a question at a time, we'll spend a minute or two on each one and get through as many as we can, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. So this question acknowledges that it's a good thing that we're building sustainment into new weapon systems from the start, but we have to plan for the next conflict with what we have now. So with that, what efforts are being made to retroactively support sustainment systems for legacy aircraft?
Ms. Tymofichuk?
This is one of my key focus areas, so I'm very pleased to respond here. So we heard a lot this week about digital efforts, and if you think about it, the term was digitally native. So weapon systems that, per the comment, were designed digitally, and we can leverage those tools in sustainment. We're not there yet. So what are we doing today in support of our legacy fleets that help us improve the way we sustain and give us more information that we need on our systems today. So I always use the term, so if I say it enough, maybe people will start using it, digitizing sustainment. So we have tools that we're using on those digitally native programs today. Why can't we translate that into our legacy portfolio? And so we have a couple of key projects that if you follow me on LinkedIn, that's pretty much what I comment on, is our digital twin efforts that we have with a partner that we established, the National Institute for Aviation Research at Wichita State University. And we have a project on B1 that started about 2 years ago, and one on F-16 that just recently kicked off. So we were actually hauling carcass out of AMARG on the B1, hauled it down the road, and you can see the pictures online. The B1, the fuselage, and then 2 separate wings, and hauled them down to NIAR, and they are taking it apart piece by piece. We're cleaning it, taking it apart, reverse engineering, creating a 3D model, assembling it in a system of record. And so we're getting information on the structure of the B1, and we chose the B1, good or bad, you can pick on me later. We chose the B1 because we were having a lot of questions on the fatigue on the B1, and what kind of information did we have and not have, what did we buy, we know that problem, what did we buy from the OEM originally, all the IP and the tech data questions we always have in sustainment. So we decided we were going to start down this path and create a digital twin. And the OEM was, as you can imagine, a little bit standoffish, saying, you got to buy that from us, But they have full circle come around and are a full teammate on this activity now. The B1 was to look at, as flown, as operated, as sustained, what are our fatigue models on that airframe, so we know what we need to get after in terms of sustainment and what we can postpone. So that was one effort. The F-16 is a little bit different. Same process, tear down, recreate a digital twin of the F-16, pulling in actual models of avionics, mechanical systems, so we can see what the F-16 is doing from a legacy, again, digitizing sustainment. And then get after things. They have a project now to reverse engineer a cable harness so we can go compete it. So it's opening up new avenues for what we can use in sustainment. We have DMS issues, we have obsolescence. We can go from an alternative route and have new solution sets available to us. So those are just some activities kicking off and things that are near and dear to my heart. My background's engineering, I apologize. But those are the kinds of things we're interested in. Additive manufacturing, I'll say it, Steve. CBM Plus out of our RSOPO. There are lots of things that we're getting after in terms of applying innovation to our sustainment needs.
And I can give an example a little more specific or germane to folks on the flight line. For some of the older folks in the crowd, you remember we'd go to tech school, come back, go to FTD, take an AGE-FAM course, and then go take an ABDR course, right? Learn how to string cables together or patch holes with beer cans. That was pulled back into CLSSs years ago, and then now it's subsumed all together into the AMXGs of the 3 ALCs. So I have 35 ABDR folks for 5 weapon systems. That's it. Is that going to support the ACE environment? No, it is not. So how do we need to fix that? Leveraging technology is one way. And I'll give you a perfect example. Last assignment at PACAF, went to Tripler, got an MRI on my back. Doc said, come back in 2 hours and we'll talk about it. So I thought they needed to actually do something with that. Came back in 2 hours. He said, yeah, I just got this back. What they did is they sent the file off to a doctor in India, a specialist, who read it, provided a response back. He saw 3 other patients, and then came to talk with me about my. So the point is, why don't we have WebMD for aircraft maintenance, right? How do we bring the entire enterprise to the point of need on a 8,000-foot rock in the middle of the Pacific for an aircraft that's been damaged or broken, right? So when I was here 2 years ago, Major General Retired Brent Baker was working with a company that had these, they're kind of massive, right? And the goal is to get it down, but these Google goggles that would allow you to look at a part in a virtual environment, would highlight what was going to be done. You could swipe over a YouTube video of someone actually doing the task. You could swipe over the tech data. You could move those out, move up the keyboard, and actually do your IMDS work and pump back into the system, right? Now, if you can digitally capture those images, why can't we relay them back to someone in the rear with a beer and the slide rules and all the capability, right? To be able to assess and develop a repair that an average airman, an untrained ABDR airman can do, all right? So that's the technology and reach back piece. The other part to that is actually doing the repair, right? So let's say it's a structure item that's damaged. So what do we normally do? We go in, we pack a bunch of clay in it, and we go back, take measurements, get a big piece and mill it down and put it in there and go, doggone it, we cut too much, we gotta redo it again, right? And it takes days, and when it's done, it's gotta be heat treated, right? So now we have the ability to take a laser scanner and scan that area. And once we have digital twins, we won't even need to be able to do that. Went out to Georgia Tech Research Institute up the road from Warner Robins ALC, where Brigadier General Hammerstead is working. They have a partnership with them. They have developed a one-armed robotic additive manufacturing machine that can build up parts. And then it pulls back. Oh, they actually build it up in a 5-axis milling machine. So you can do additive and subtractive at the same time, right? And that whole setup fits in a Sealand container. Yes, that's what we need at our hubs, right? We need folks at the point to be able to transmit specific information to folks, to engineers back here, quickly form a response, shoot it to the hub to make a part, and then tack air it or high-speed boat it over to the spoke, right? And we're working on that. We're advancing some of those initiatives in each of our ABDR shops, working on technologies, but we need industry to help us go faster, and then a little bit of policy to break down some barriers will help. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Man, if that does not get you excited to be a loggy and a maintainer, you better check yourself for a pulse. That is some cool stuff. Thanks for the example, sir, and thank you, Ms. T. Appreciate it. Dara?
Yes, sir. Next question. Data rights continue to be a delicate subject as we bring in new weapon systems. How do we navigate this going forward?
Can I take that one? Can
Go
I lead in? That'd be awesome. Passionate about this, right?
You're not passionate about anything, General.
No.
Easy, Samples, easy. So, the funny thing is that this guy outranked me a long time. When he was the LOA vice president, I was the LOA CFO during sequestration. So we helped build LOA University and other things. So a lot of history there.
Little salt in the wounds, thanks.
No, it's all good. No, dude. Hey, brother, it's all good. Hey, so this topic's pretty germane to me because that's some of the big. Let me set the stage on this. We are buying fewer and fewer aircraft and pieces of equipment, right? So that's less income for the primes. Primes have an obligation to provide value to their shareholders. So they are holding on to sustainment, right? That's becoming big business for them. What's that doing? Driving up the cost of sustainment, which is leaving us less money to buy new airplanes. And you can see an equipment, you can see the spiral, right? And so some of the ways that they're locking in on sustainment, holding on to tech data, proprietary material, proprietary processes, and lock on the subs, right? And I'm not saying the primes are bad, we love them, we need them, it's an arranged marriage that mostly works, but in some cases, we have to think through this a little bit better. We need the primes out advancing the next technology, but we also need to have the funding for the Air Force to be able to go buy the things that reward them for that behavior. Part of that is migrating some sustainment where it makes sense to the organic, to the services side. We can't do that without digital tech data, right? And so I know in our acquisition programs, and I won't swim in Ms. T's lane because she'll hit on that, I know we are going out to try and include that in the cost. We're doing very well on that on the software realm with KC-46, B-21, others. We are getting out there. On the aircraft side, that is much more challenging because we're fighting that pull for their ability to do the work and produce revenue from it. I will give you one example of an amazing partnership that is the way we need to go all the way across the board. General Electric Engines, we have a partnership with them called Pacer Edge. So GE and Rolls and others are going to be making more engine parts with 3D printing, 3D metal printing. It's cheaper, it's faster, right? So if they're going to be making them that way, we need to be able to repair them that way, which is why we're pushing so hard for additive. Makes sense, right? Well, rather than holding a lock on that technology and the tech data and all those things so that we have to come back to them for repair, they apparently read the 5 languages of love. They know what our love language is. It's sustainment, right? That's what we do. And so they've invested in a long-term relationship. And through this, I say they invested, we're investing, they agreed to it. We're paying through this contract, and they signed up to sell us the 3D machines, help us install them, teach them how to use them, and we get the data file for every part that they additively manufacture, right? So they're like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna produce this engine, we're gonna keep producing, you're gonna sustain it, and then we're gonna go on to the next engine, right? That's investment in a long-term relationship, not a tactical activity. That's how it works best in organic, private-public partnerships. And so our first printers are being put on the floor right now, training starts, and we'll move on. And that effort will help guide a larger effort that Ms. T and Mr. Fisher, Ian for AFMC and others are trying to help accelerate additive to be able to go faster for all of you. So, Ms. T, I'm sure you want to
I want to get back to Ms. Method on something, if it's okay. Mr. Morani talked about asset visibility of the supply chain, but I really want to hear your thoughts on risks that are occurring to the supply chain, hacking in, all the things that are kind of, maybe we haven't put as much focus. I mean, we've thought about it a lot, and a lot of activities occurred, but what's the latest and greatest on what we're doing to secure the supply chain to make sure stuff gets where it needs to be, when it needs to be, and we stop losing some of that capability that we have experienced? Can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks, because I was really looking forward to kind of riffing on the MRI piece. That's something we've been working on for a while, and that's a great use case for being able to see into the supply chain in all kinds of different ways. And it's interesting, we even have supply chain was featured on the front cover of the Sports Illustrated. We are out there. So when you had the pylon wars during the playoffs, football playoffs, specifically what we're referring to in this space is supply chain risk management. If you haven't heard the term SCRIM, supply chain risk management, that's the term. And you see the term supply chain risk management, you go, oh, it's supply chain. So they start talking to the supply guys. It's not. It is all of us. It's cyber. It's infrastructure. You're talking about your plant ability, resiliency, and everything like that. It's the acquisition. It's procurement. It's sustaining it. So one of the things we don't have in the DoD is a holistic, coordinated supply chain risk management framework, so that we all understand that the definitions are the same. We understand where the stakeholder groupings are, who's doing what in what lane, and what is the outcomes that are looking for. And if we don't have that framework that we can work within and understand how we're working in that framework, then we can't uncover the other gaps that we don't know about. We know some of the gaps, some of them are funded, some of them are still waiting. But there's other gaps out there that may be a higher priority that we can't get to because we can't see them yet. But we have to have those conversations out there. So literally, we launched last month in February, we launched a supply chain risk management framework effort. We're working with DAU, academia, industry, and other parts of government to build out that framework. We are starting working groups starting next month. And our goal is by the end of the calendar year to have an initial framework out on the street. Now, I have a responsibility for defining the framework, but I'm not necessarily doing the work. This is everybody from the CIO's office to research and engineering, to acquisition, industrial policy, DHS, the cyber infrastructure folks. So there's a whole host of actors that don't have an LRO or a logistics AFSC of some sort tied to them. These are other folks in our larger universe. There's several lines of effort we're working on. I'm going to keep it brief, but the three main ones to think about is the resiliency efforts that Mr. Morani talked about with the industrial base, that we are how do we make sure that our OEMs and our manufacturers, that they have the ability to protect critical technologies and materials and be able to do that work. In the acquisition supply chain, talking about security and the ability for being able to effectively manage the supply chains as we acquire weapon systems, build those programs out. And then you have supply chain sustainment, and that's much more in the traditional supply logistics, DLA types of realm. And that's ability to assess and monitor the risks that we have across. And I'll leave it with just this. Every one of us are having this conversation. We don't always label it as supply chain risk, and I would say it is literally a half step away from having the conversation in my first answer where I talked about sustainability and climate, and sustainability and sustainment go hand in hand. And it's really an exciting time for the department. We're going to be able to get our hands around this framework. We're going to be able to have the conversation. Everybody's going to understand how to have the conversation, and then we'll see where we go from there. So very exciting.
Great. Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left. So quickly, a lot of CGOs out there. Mr. Morani, you could give them one bit of advice. What would it be?
Oh boy. I mean, yeah, so, okay, I got one, and no one's gonna give you this one, but, and it's not strategic, so, but bear with me. So, and I need you to look things up and not make things up, okay? We have gotten away from referencing all of our policies and frameworks and authorities and knowing what the right thing to do is, and have relied on making stuff up. So my one piece of advice, look it up, know your business, know where to look it up, and understand it. You will have so much power and authority, and actually you will reduce bureaucracy if you know that. So you can answer your chief's mail by doing that. Look it up, don't make it up.
Love it. Ms. T?
As the only pure civilian up here on this stage, I'll say one thing to the CGOs and then one thing to the GS. So the CGO, so if you don't know, my husband's retired to 1M. So he raised me well. And I know from my fact as a spouse that what Chief Bass said yesterday is the best advice ever. Find yourself a good NCO and hang on to him. My husband still is in very close contact with his chief. So I can't speak enough for the relationship that can forge there. But I guess for all of you is the networking, and that came up, I think, in a couple of presentations as well. That is a very small Air Force, and if you think there's a lot of loggies out there, it's still a very small log nation. So no matter where you're gonna go, you're gonna see somebody that you know, and it's that networking, and that makes that community all the best. So that would be my advice.
Ms. Method.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep this really fast. Success in life and career is 5 things. Be a battle buddy, have a plan, work the plan. If plans change the plan, work that plan. Try new things. You don't know what you've learned until you've tried it in another area.
This is awesome.
Thank the volunteers around you, and every one of you in here is a volunteer. Thank the volunteers around you. They're the ones that hand out the orange slices in the water on the races. And listen to your road guards. These are your mentors. They're going to keep you on the path, and if they are truly a mentor, they have your interest in mind, not their own. That's success.
Wow.
Holy cow, drop the mic.
Can we get a copy of that?
All right, General King.
Wow, okay, I will try and go that fast, but I won't be able to do as good. I've learned over the years that the higher you go, the more you're responsible for, the less you control in terms of policy and resources. I'll tell you at all levels, relationships and the ability to negotiate are our stock in trade. If you could study one thing, pick up a book on negotiations. If you need to know one, email me, I'll shoot you a couple, it's a passion. Yeah, just people don't you can be the smartest person in the room and no one's gonna wanna work with you, right? So build and develop good relationships. Here's one quick example and then I'll end. Gym rats don't skip leg day, right? Otherwise you look like you rode a chicken over to the curl bar, right? IQ is tremendously important. EQ is just as important, all right? So just as you want to be balanced, you know, when you're doing the GYM Act, you want to be balanced in IQ and EQ. You don't want to be kicked off the team because you're the smartest person in the room, but you can't get along with other people. Roger?
Man, fantastic.
That's good.
Hey, thank you so much, the four of you. I know you're super busy. You came out here, you're here all week. We all grew up together. We used to be them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you guys are here. It can be done.
It can happen.
It can be done. And you want to have these people at the head of the table. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the conference.
Kevin, thank you.